Right, so this is a little bit of an experiment, a new podcast for My Football Writer. We have done them before, way back in 2008, 2009, we were playing with the medium, but it was just an experiment to see how it goes. And I'm delighted to be joined by two of our My Football Writer esteemed columnists here. I've got Connor and I've got Steve. And we're just going to talk gently about where we've got to this season. Hasn't been maybe a classic season so far, but let's just see where we get to, see where the problems lie, and see if we can look ahead to a few solutions, particularly with the January transfer window coming up. So, Steve, if I start with you, you wrote a very good piece today, kind of a bit of a soul-searcher one. It's not been an easy season so far. Fair to say?
I think that's more than fair to say, and thank you for the kind words on the piece. Some would say it was a downright miserable piece, and I'm a downright miserable person for writing it. But I think reflections on the season so far is that, well, I think I put it in my piece, lack of entertainment for me. It's results are one thing, but we go to football matches to be entertained, and at the moment there's precious little of that on show. So bit by bit, you kind of, well, it becomes hard. It becomes hard to watch, I think.
Connor, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you've got to echo what Steve says about the entertainment factor being a big part of it. I think when fans becoming a fourth official and that's your main story from the game, I think there's always going to be fans that are going to moan about that. But I sort of see it in the way that if you win games 1-0, 2-0, I'm not sure people talk about entertainment. I think winning sort of is entertainment in that respect. But yeah, I think there's obviously areas to improve offensively. Norwich just look out of ideas, no creativity. Hopefully, Pritchard returning from injury will help that. But as I say, a lot to sort of work on and to improve on. But I think that was always going to be the case, especially with sort of the new structure and whatnot. So yeah, I think we're where we deserve to be. But I think there's a lot to give.
So again, it wasn't only a few weeks ago that Arsenal performance away, the Ipswich performance, everyone seemed to be buzzing, bubbling, etc. So kind of where's it gone wrong in the last 4-6 weeks? Why has the foot come off the gas?
I think it's the perception of results, because I'd argue that actually in terms of performances and in terms of the way we were playing, there hasn't been a sudden drop-off. It's just been more around perception driven by the results. I mean, like, if you look at... I was up at the Riverside when we beat Borough and we won 1-0 and I came away going, oh, yeah, fantastic. In reality, we had, I think, 2 chances. Maddison scored a worldie, Jerome missed a very presentable chance. And yet, because we won, we came away going, oh, what a great performance. And yet, suddenly now the goals aren't going in. We're not getting the results, and people are kind of seeing the performances for what they are, which are kind of fairly turgid affairs. We don't create many chances. We don't take the ones that we do make, and and when you don't get a performance at the end of it, your judgment's coloured by it, I think.
I think the absence of Teti as well has been a big factor. I think where we looked defensively sound, he'd shield sort of the back four really well. I think Tribal has sort of been exposed in a more defensive position. I think, as you say, the lack of chances, the moments of quality away from home have dried up. You're suddenly not scoring 25-yarders and you're leaking goals the other end. But it's difficult to say. I think there's been key injuries. I think the offensive woes have been spoken about a lot, and I think that's obviously the key for improvement, really.
Teti's an interesting one, isn't he? Because he's the sort of player that I think probably doesn't get the kudos he deserves, and yet we have missed him. Unmistakably so. It's kind of a player that actually you don't appreciate. It's the classic cliche, isn't it? You don't appreciate him until he's gone. And I think you're right. He's added that, or the lack of Teti in the midfield is shown, well, exposed the other players who play in that position, I think.
I don't go to games hardly at all these days. My kind of interests have moved on. But it always struck me when you look back, you mentioned the Rhoda, the period, which was another fairly dark period, where clearly the club were bringing in second division Scottish players, with the kind of honourable exception of Simon Lappin. If you bring in enough players from the second division of the Scottish League, you kind of end up in a second division equivalent. Obviously, this time we're now delving into the first division of the German league market. Are we convinced yet that those are the kind of characters that can take us beyond the Championship level, or are you just standing still in terms of player recruitment?
In a word, I think no. I mean, you look at the signings that we've made. I think the most impressive has probably been Angus Gunn. Harrison Reed has been decent, and then you're looking at Tribal when he was alongside Tetty has been sort of the one after that. But there's still question marks around Zimmerman, even though he sort of impressed during that period. Vrancic leaves a lot to be desired, and I don't know. I think it remains to be seen. I think the way the Germans sort of play football and talk about football, and the whole German culture is completely different to how it is over here. So naturally, there's going to be a period of sort of adaptation, if you like. But I think what you're going to get is technique. You're going to get players who are going to work hard. But I'm not sure they've adapted yet, and I think that's sort of the issue.
And I think you're right. I mean, often, I guess the difference when we're talking about second-rate Scottish players to second-rate German players is actually if you move in country, different. I know a lot of Europeans speak brilliant English, but it is a fundamental cultural change for them as well. I mean, I'd echo what Connor said. I think Tribal for me has been the one that has stood out. I think before he got injured, I think he was genuinely one of our better players. Vrancic, on the other hand, I know he's divisive. To me, he's just not up to it. Actually, I've got a mate of mine who says, "Oh, you're missing the point. He's this classy playmaker," but to my mind, he just looks completely ill-equipped.
You look back, doesn't there always seem to be one fall guy? I mean, I'm going to pick out Andy Hughes. In a poor performing season, or when they hit a sort of fallow period in terms of performances and results, there always kind of seems to be one fall guy. And is Vrancic the one this year? You
need a scapegoat, don't you? I think I saw Russell Martin trotting off the pitch and handing the armband over to Vrancic and go, "There you go, son. The mantle's yours." But his performances haven't been up to it. And people, you can't even say it was massive expectations because he didn't come with a big price tag. He didn't come with a big reputation. So it's like it's not like he's suffering because we all thought he was the Messiah, and he isn't. He's getting some stick because he's playing pretty poorly, isn't he?
It's a really interesting one because pre-season he looked one of our better players. I think he's come from he was at Darmstadt last year in the Bundesliga, played sort of more of a defensive midfield anchor role, and I think the tempo of that position is a lot different to where he's played this year. In terms of sort of being the guy that is blamed, I think probably. I don't think he's had bad performances, but they've been equally as bad as other players. So, he definitely needs to improve and step it up. I think that's a given, really.
If we need a scapegoat or a fall guy, maybe the club should actually recruit on that basis and bring in a particular player purely because he's got mental resolve and that he can take it. It's absolutely rubbish, but we didn't bring you in for that. We brought you because you'll take all the stick and you can deal with it. I don't know.
Again, I'm looking at it from a distant point of view. I don't do the games and this, that and the other. But it strikes me that there's a leadership issue. Is there a player out there who's not actually grabbing games, even when they're playing poorly, by the scruff of the neck and actually shaking people up and grinding out a result? Obviously Grant Holt would be the classic example.
We've probably not had a leader since Grant Holt, I'd suggest. Connor mentioned him earlier, Russell Martin as a scapegoat. I think Russell Martin's a great club captain, a great ambassador. Is he an on the field pitch leader? Well, from the stands, he doesn't necessarily appear to be that way. I'm sure the changing room might disagree. But your point's absolutely right. You're looking for players who'll set the example, who will be that talismanic figure that will grab them up and push them along. And since Holty, we haven't had it.
Yeah, I look at the squad. I think absolutely there's a leadership issue. The one that I think could step into it is Grant Hanley. I think he's someone who played a lot of games for Blackburn, was captain for a lot of games, but he's still 25 and has been in and out of the side. So, in terms of sort of a permanent fixture in the squad as a leader, I think there's definitely an issue because, as you say, we've never replaced Grant Holt in that respect.
No. In saying that, Ivo Pinto, I think he's done a good job actually since he's taken the armband. He was always a popular figure anyway because of for nothing else than actually he's decent on social media. He engages with the club, he gets the club, and his performances, he's all effort, isn't he?
I think he's stepped into the role well, actually, and probably better than I was expecting him to. I think him as a player is really interesting because he came to English football, and much like Vrancic, to sort of a lesser degree, he was caught out completely by English football and the way it was. I think a newspaper described him as having the positional awareness for lasagna at one stage. So, and now
I aspire to that kind of talent, to be fair. So
me too. But he's turned into sort of this tough tackling warrior, wearing a mask right back, and it took him time, and I think it'll probably take the others time. But hopefully he grows into that leadership role more. The more he does it.
I think it's not just about leadership, though, to a degree. It's about a team identity. And I remember when Farke came in and he talked about the importance of identity, and when you watched his team play, you'd know it was a Norwich City team play. And that doesn't come across. You don't sit there and feel, right, this is the way we play, this is, or that there's a character to the side. No one dictates the tempo of the pitch. It looks like a team of kind of disparate players struggling to gel.
So do you get a sense, that he has a structure in place, that he has a set way of playing, and is the danger that he's starting to, put square pegs into round holes just to fit the style of play that he wants to play?
I mean, one thing that struck me is that he's very quick to change formation, which actually I think is a good thing, because we used to criticise Chris Hughton for sticking rigidly, and even Alex Neil as well, sticking rigidly to formations and not considering alternatives. Farke's very prepared to do that. Ironically, he's got some stick for doing it, because Barnsley game where he went to 3 at the back and we conceded shortly afterwards. I think what he's trying to do is kind of imprint that philosophy, and he talked about, I want out of possession, I want the high press. In possession, I want to retain possession for as long as possible. I want to work the opposition by moving the ball about. We're not seeing much of that at the moment, and it doesn't look, to my mind, I know he's spelt out what he wants, but I don't see much evidence of it.
Yeah, he's described it a few times as wanting to play like Thomas Tuchel at Borussia Dortmund when he was there, and the way Norwich just don't look in that model at the moment. The way he sort of shored up the defence, I always felt was very short term. I think the way he approached away games and sort of went there to sort of copy a Neil Warnock, if you like, in terms of style, I think was always sort of a short term point of view. And I think slowly he's implementing different parts of it, but I don't think we're going to see it this season as to how he completely wants to play. I think that is going to be next season is the one.
I guess the question is, do you stick to a philosophy and then bring the players in to fix it, or do you actually look at the players that we've got and say, right, how am I best going to get a performance out of the squad that I've got?
Well, that's the thing. I think Norwich have been guilty of the past of doing that, having a bunch of players and trying to fit them into a system. I think if you have a system and you're building players into it, I think it's easy from the recruitment side. Whether it works in terms of getting results in the short term is a different matter, but I think what he's trying to do is develop a squad that plays the way he wants to. We've seen creative players out wide. I don't necessarily think that's what he's after, and I don't think he's got all the players he wants. And I think that's the big issue at the moment.
Which kind of begs the question: just how important is the next transfer window?
In principle, it's massive. However, I know my limited understanding of the club's finances is that we're unlikely to see a whole bunch of new people coming in, not unless we cash in on maybe the 2 or 3 saleable assets that we've got. So I don't, they always talk about the value that's had in the January market, and it's not there to be had. You could argue that our current situation is a reflection of that. The fact that we panic bought Closer, Naismith on big contracts, there isn't the value to be had in January. I don't expect us to make many big moves in the market unless we free up our load of money by cashing in on a Pritchard or a Maddison or someone. So to my mind, what he has to do is look at the players that he's got and think, okay, so how do you get the best out of them? And for me, it means building the team around Pritchard and hoping that actually now that he's back into sort of first team reckoning, that that we get the rest of the season out of him.
I think that's it. Yeah, I'd be very surprised if we see any, if signings in January in terms of incomings. I think it's going to be all about outgoings. I think if you see Naismith go, I wouldn't be surprised. Closer even, I can see going. I think, as you say, the only plausible way I can see Norwich bringing in players is if you sell the likes of Oliveira and Maddison, and because the finances simply aren't there to sort of overhaul the squad at this stage. And I don't think Farker would necessarily want to do that. I think he's got quite a strong belief in his squad. I can see a loan, to be honest. I can see a loan. I'm not sure where or what position, but it wouldn't surprise me.
I'd suggest we need something up front.
Maybe, but I think in terms of the men behind him or behind the striker, they've not created a lot, and strikers have dropped deep because of it. That's sort of why Oliveira was so poor against Preston. He was dropping in and effectively taking the space from Maddison. They were cancelling each other out, and then you've got your two narrow wingers, and it all gets a bit congested in the middle. So I think for me it's just stretching the game, getting two dynamic wingers on and trying to get a ball in the box, but maybe I'm old-fashioned.
Well, you're younger than me, so...
So, okay, I'll play devil's advocate here. There was clearly, a big mood against selling Oliveira in the summer. That, Nelson was going to be this, that and the other. Now, if retrospect, if someone had come in with 8 mil or whatever, 10 mil, would you have taken it?
I think Swansea bid 12, which was rejected. So, in terms of the club, I don't think they would. I think they see him as the man to build around, which is interesting because he's an interesting one. He always looks like he's a tackle away from a red card, but then a moment of genius away from winning the game for you. So. He's a really odd player, and I suppose it's about how you manage him. At the moment, he doesn't look particularly happy. He cut a frustrated figure on Saturday, definitely. I'm not sure if I would. No, I think the quality of player he is, he's always got it in his locker where he can beat a man and put it in. So I don't know. I think he wins you games. And
I think you're right, and I think, what did we say, for 8 mil? That won't buy you a decent right back these days, will it? I mean, if you're looking for a striker, what did Assombalonga went for 15 mil to Middlesbrough? So, and he's not exactly tearing it up. So you kind of think to get goals in the Championship, you either have to be lucky or you have to pay considerable amounts, don't you?
You look at the amount he's played as well. He's got 5 goals, and he's been quite bit part because of injuries and his antics and whatnot. So, no, I don't think I'd take 8 million.
So Marley Watkins, has he stepped up yet?
Who, sorry? Yeah, I know. I've been really disappointed with Marley Watkins. I mean, I know I'm sounding completely miserable and morose, but it's not clear to me where he's meant to play, what he adds. He's a bit of a... Well, I remember saying the same about Lafferty when he came in. And I know everyone, I'm probably going to get a load of dogs abuse for criticising St Kyle, but for me, as soon as I saw Lafferty in the Norwich shirt, I was like, well, he was playing wide left initially, and I thought, well, what does this player bring to the team? And it's the same with Marley Watkins. I know we've tried him up front, we've played him in several of the attacking positions, and yet it's not clear to me what is the purpose of Marley Watkins. I don't know.
He doesn't look good enough as a striker. I think that's my first thought on him. I think he's one of these players where if you get him away from home and you want to sit back and you want to absorb pressure and you want to hit them on the counter, he's one of the guys that you put out wide. I don't think we've seen.
He quick though?
I've not seen it, to be honest. As brutal as that is, I've not really seen enough of him to comment on him as a footballer. But he's just been really, really poor, to be honest. There's been times where I've sort of gone, he's playing, and and that's the issue with me. Sort of. Well, he doesn't even drift into games. He sort of just drifts out of them. And no, he's not done enough for me.
He's fallen foul of my dad test because I sit with my dad at the matches, and when my dad doesn't rate a player, he has to ask, "Who's that?" And it's always the same with Marley Watkins. Who's that? Who's that number 12? That's Marley Watkins, Dad. Yeah.
Do you get a sense that when things aren't quite going well on the pitch, the whole ownership issue rears its ugly head? We have go back through the whole ambition versus prudence argument. We can go back to the infamous Times article where we're going nowhere, etc., etc. Is that adding to the sense of unease or disappointment or frustration? What do you think?
There's a natural hierarchy in terms of where you voice your displeasure, don't you? Because if you see a poor game, first of all, you'll look at the players and you'll go, oh, he was rubbish or he made a mistake. If it's a run of bad games, then it's the manager doesn't know what he's doing. If it's a longer run of games, then you start to question the chief exec or someone, well, he's not giving the manager support. But ultimately, the buck stops at the very top. And because we've got a high-profile owner, it tends to be Delia that cops it in the neck. And so when people are feeling frustrated, when things aren't going as they hope they would, questions will be asked. And it's always simmering away. It's been like that for a long time. You always feel that we're only a series of results away from people kind of naturally saying it's the self-funding model, it's the kind of lack of money, it's the lack of investment. So I can understand where it comes from.
I think as human beings, when something's going wrong, you want someone to blame. And I think, particularly in football, you look at those who sit in the comfy seats and the gods and, absorb everything. But they've not helped themselves in terms of sound bites they've given. Obviously, the Times article that you've mentioned wasn't helpful for them at all. The fact they've recently come out and said they're not seeking external investment, I think also didn't help them. But in terms of where we are and where they are in terms of what they bring to the club, I don't think Norwich can attract a Middle East billionaire at this stage, because it's different when you're in the Premier League. But I don't know. You look at Wolves and you think, okay, someone's gone in there and they've spent a fair bit and they've brought in quality. But it's difficult because it doesn't guarantee success. And I think it's a very, particularly in the short term, you look at the top six at the moment. I think Villa are in there, Wolves are in there who've spent a lot, and I think Derby have spent a reasonable bit as well. But I think it's Bristol City who've spent a relative amount. But then you've got Sheffield United and Cardiff who haven't spent a lot at all. So it's a complete gamble and it's a complete risk. And I'm not sure, Norwich being sort of the chips, if you like, I'm not sure if I'd be willing to risk that.
It's the discussion and argument that will just go round and round, because for every example of a club that has had successful investment, someone will be able to kind of go, yeah, but you look at Portsmouth or look at whoever, and you can cite the examples that you want. The fact remains, as a Norwich fan, are we content with the current model? Are we content with the direction the club's going? And in essence, if the answer's yes, you say, right, absolutely, it's too risky to seek foreign investment. If the answer's no, you say, well, someone would buy the club and it's got to be better than where we are at the moment.
I mean, in theory, the Wevolution is producing another Huddersfield. That's the theory.
That's the plan, right?
And actually, when you look at Huddersfield in the Premier League, you're going, yeah, okay, you're doing well and this, that and the other. I'd probably argue that Norwich are a bigger club than Huddersfield. But do you sense you're on the road to Huddersfield?
I guess Wagner didn't excel in his first season, did he?
No, I think there was 16th when he came in and finished 17th. So, and he was appointed in sort of between October and January. I'm not sure when. So even they had a bit of period where they didn't get used to his football. I think Stuart Webber said in an interview how the fans got on his back and wanted the tippy-tappy football to, be gone and to see a 4-4-2 and a long ball. So these things take time. It's hard to say at this moment because it's so early on, and obviously it's dipped in and out of form, and it's been as good as it has been bad, and yeah, it's really hard to predict. I think at this stage,
looking back over all the years I sound like an old man. All the years I've supported Norwich City, there've been times where it's been dire, and you look back at the Roeder era, you look back at the second season with Chris Hughton, but there's the times where it's been really good, and I can think back to Mike Walker, I can think back to obviously Paul Lambert. For those years, they're few and far between, and to get that sustained success, you need everything to be aligned. You need the club to be, it sounds cliche, but as one. You need them pulling in the right direction. You need the right blend of players. You need the right manager at the right time. And it's really rare. And the thing is, it doesn't take an awful lot to destabilise it either. As we saw with Lambert, it's like, you think there we were on the 3-year journey, he kept us up. And then within, a few months, Holt wanted away, Lambert had gone to Villa, and things get destabilised really quickly. It doesn't feel right now that we're on the cusp of greatness. personally. I fear for where we are, because you kind of look at what we've done with the money that we've got, and you'd say we've got a side that's rightfully where it deserves to be in middle of the championship. The money is, we're not suddenly going to create money out of nowhere. If to do so would mean actually selling someone, which you'd argue is only going to make us weaker. So yeah, I don't feel that great times ahead.
Yeah, I echo that 100%. Yeah.
So we're going into a January transfer window. What has to happen?
I think you've got to keep your assets, particularly in January. I think it's a bit different in the summer. I think players like Maddison are inevitably going to get linked with the big wigs, but they need to stand firm, because you take Maddison out of that side, and I know Pritchard's got to come back, but you look at that, there's not a lot to it, and you start selling your assets, the squad becomes even more unconfident. You start looking over your shoulder, and things become precarious. So for me, it's keeping the players and hoping to shift some dead wood. Your Naismiths, your Jarvis. As I said earlier, I can see Closer leaving quite plausibly. So for me, it's keeping your assets and not being tempted by the big money. And
I'd agree with that. I think the club will come under a lot of pressure to do something and to be seen to bring in someone. If they don't, I think the usual thing, no ambition. What are you trying to do? But as we said before, there's no market. There's no value in the market. I do think we're light of strikers. I don't see Naismith as an out-and-out striker, and between Jerome and Oliveira, you kind of feel if one of them's not firing, the other one isn't naturally going to come in. So I'd like to see something, maybe a loan or something, but
I think Stuart Webber said before, if you have to do business in January, then you panic buying. So
it's true enough.
I don't know if he'd be like, if that comment will come back to haunt him, but we'll see, I guess. But I can't see many incomings.
So the question is, do we need to panic? Are we in panic mode?
Not for me, not yet. I think this is more than a bad run of form now. It's a sustained period of us being pretty poor. I think we've if you go on recent history, panicking isn't the best road to go down. You look at Stephen Naismith, Yannick Fieldskirk, who has been better this season, but not for the money spent. I don't think we panic at this stage.
I think it depends on your expectations. I think that's what it boils down, because I think there'll be a lot of people who resign to the fact that actually promotion isn't a realistic prospect now. We might threaten the playoffs, but on current form, on the performances that we've seen, you'd say that's unlikely. So you'll panic if you sit there and think, yeah, we should have gone up, and if we don't, then it's going to lead to years of mediocrity, as we might find down in Suffolk. But
the thing is, if they don't do anything, they, as you say, they're going to get called. That they've got no ambition. That that could come back to haunt them if they don't make the playoffs. But I think they've got to stand firm and stick to what they're doing at the moment, and believe in the way they're going. And people have to accept that this is sort of a transitional season, I'm afraid.
All right, I'm gonna put your heads on the line here, boys. Right, where are they going to finish?
I'm going to let Connor go first and then laugh at him.
I'd be pleased with top 10. To be honest, at this stage, I think mid-table comfortably, 11th, 10th, something like that.
Yeah, I might go 9th. See, I'm far more positive than you. I thought I was the misery. I can't see the playoffs. I can't see him.
I look at what's in the playoffs at the moment. I think we're miles off it, to be honest. Sadly.
Happy days, huh?
All right, let's try and finish on a positive note. If you had one player you could bring in January, who would it be?
What? No budgetary constraints.
You're looking around at championship level.
Mm-hmm.
Look at him changing the rules, huh?
Oh, no, yeah.
I thought it was like Santa Rick. I thought he was going to deliver in a big
nice,
sack.
It would have been nice. I look at a striker at Peterborough, Marriott, who's come in there and added pace and a few goals. I think he'd be quite a nice addition, ideally. But that's me looking lower down the leagues. That's without me sort of looking deeply into the German market. So who knows?
I quite like. There's a midfielder at Middlesbrough who looks after pigeons, and I've always rated him, Johnny Howson. I miss Johnny. I want him back.
Boys, thank you very much indeed. Enlightening stuff. Take care.